Hello there and a very warm welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I'm Victor Matthias. Now, as the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari begins to wind down, candidates of political parties have been crisscrossing the length and breadth of the country, canvassing for votes. Now, today on the program, we'll be taking a look at the policy document of some of the candidates and what they intend to do to consolidate on the successes recorded by the Buhari administration in the tech ecosystem, especially with regards to infrastructure and other, inclusion, privacy, amongst many others. But let's first of all get to see what made the trends in the past week before we begin analyzing the proposition of some of these candidates. After so much furore, the CBN governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, obtained President Muhammadu Buhari's approval to extend by 10 days the deadline for the usage of the old to the new Naira notes. This is coming after Nigerians, including presidential candidates and the House of Representatives, kicked against the policy. The House has since rejected the extension, asking the CBN to further extend till the end of June. It was a Black Sunday as yet another container fell off its carrier and killed about 9 persons in the Ojuelegba area of Lagos and has sparked outrage and heated reactions on and offline as this is happening one too many times at the same spot. Hours after the mishap, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, while condoling with the families of the victims, assured of a thorough investigation into the matter. Well, there you go. Those were the trends. We also put out our hearts to those who were victims, of that unfortunate incident at the Ojuelegba access or area of Lagos State. But I'm now being joined by Timi Olagunju. He's a policy consultant and a tech lawyer with over a decade experience in tech policy research as well as regulatory sectors. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Victor.
Of course. Yeah. So, I know today we're here to, pretty much have a deep dive into the policy framework or the manifestos, of some political candidates, in the general elections coming up in some few days from now. But let's just do a quick wrap up, of the successes, that have been achieved by this administration in the tech ecosystem. What can you point at, to say, okay, this is what was done?
Well, firstly, I must commend the existence of the Startup Act, which apparently requires statewide domestication across the 36 states in Nigeria for localized context of it, and as well as implementation. So that's one key commendation. And also you see that, for example, NIDA is working towards a blockchain policy, and you see that there is a lot of investment in training people in terms of some emerging technology, blockchain, and things of that nature.
AI.
So yeah, AI, there's this partnership, I think, with the private sector, Microsoft and some other players in the game. So I think that's quite commendable, although there are also some other things that needs to be done. For example, the Digital Rights and Freedoms Bill has passed the National Assembly but has not received presidential assent. And you cannot talk about adequate, robust consumer protection in the digital space without such a bill in context becoming law. And then you now talk about issues about data privacy protection. We don't have a robust legislation. We just have a bylaw. And that will not suffice for the many myriad of issues. Recently, INEC talked about possible hacking of its database. So that involves the data of, and when you talk of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the likes, they're all built on the foundation of data. And so you need to protect the data of Nigerians adequately. And I think FEC, that's the National Federal Executive Council, just okayed the bill for the National Assembly. But whether they will be able to pass that in the short time they have before election is still something up for debate.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see if that is going to play out. But I guess we can begin this this conversation, on that particular note, talking about, data privacy and all of that. What are some of the candidates saying about this?
Interestingly, it might interest you to know, as well as the audience, that in terms of data protection, none of the candidates are saying anything. When you read through the manifesto, the 115-page manifesto of article, or the 80-page manifesto, 76-page manifesto of OB, and the likes, you realize, as well as Tinubu and Kwakwanso, those are perhaps, let's say, from the polls, the four leading presidential candidates, not the only. But then you see that none of them said anything about data protection in their manifestos. And it's quite shocking because there were a lot of buzzwords around blockchain, around cybercrime, cybersecurity, around artificial intelligence development, but not to understand that the basics of all this is data, right? And data protection is a key step towards, ensuring that those data of Nigerians is adequate, because data is actually the new oil, like they say. So those are key issues.
Well, hopefully, I don't know. I mean, the manifestos are out there already.
Yes.
So, I mean,
hopefully they're listening to critics.
And they would adjust.
They're working on
but
it.
Let's look at infrastructure. I mean, because, in all of this, I mean, we keep talking about, we mostly talk about, what is already, in the open. But infrastructure-wise, looking about trying to even IoT, and all those things, what are they saying? Yeah, so for broadband to work, you need the infrastructure, pretty much, the masts, and all of that. Where are we, or what are they saying in that regard?
Okay, so interestingly, for Atiku, he dedicated page 35 to infrastructure, technology infrastructure, and talked about possible partnerships with accelerators as well as incubators towards driving technological development. Also talked about funding research for agencies of government as well as, institutions of learning and tertiary institutions towards research and training in those aspects, but nothing too concrete. You understand what I'm saying? But interestingly, the other candidates, right, kind of scratched the surface. But let me talk a bit about Kwakwanso. Kwakwanso's view of technological infrastructure seems to dovetail towards localization, developing indigenous
content
infrastructure that can, indigenous solutions towards solving the technology infrastructure challenges. Whether that is visible is still something of debate. And then you see where someone like Obi talks about the fact that, there will be some investments in developing the technology space, not necessarily particular mention of infrastructure in that sense. And the only candidate that even mentioned broadband development, interestingly, in that sense of its page 32 of the manifesto, was Atiku. So it tells you that, and if the foundation be destroyed, what can the makeup artists do? Than put powder, right? So if the manifesto is not covering the basic foundation, which is infrastructure upon which the layers of development is built, it becomes a challenge.
Well, so clearly you said all of them have mentioned the buzzwords, blockchain, cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence.
Even when you look at intellectual property as well, you know?
So intellectual property as well. We don't seem to have so much, of that currently. But moving forward, that is very key. Intellectual property is
very key. Very key.
And you have to put that into perspective, looking at the fact that intellectual property is, I mean, it's your talent. It's your idea. And if that is stolen, I mean, litigations, cries. I mean, it's just going to be too much. But let's look at security. Because if you have the foundation, you build everything, you need to secure. Where are we, or what are they saying in that regard?
Okay, so security, we can say traditional security issues and cybersecurity. So for the tech space, in terms of cybersecurity, of all the three candidates, because I've read robustly all their documents and contextualize it to the tech space, of all the candidates, the only candidate that mentioned cybersecurity as well as dealing with cybercrime also was Atiku's manifesto. Sadly so.
There's nothing sad about it.
However, I am aware that at a particular rally of one of the candidates, that's Tinubu, he mentioned talked about Yahoo boys, cybercrime, and that perhaps they're going to empower Yahoo boys to transition from being what they are, what they do, into building chips and, it was a bit of gibberish though, but I think that was the sense that people made of what he said. They said in that sense, But interestingly, that's the only manifesto that robustly deals a bit more with cybersecurity and cybercrime.
Yeah. But would you say the current situation is perhaps the reason why the candidates might have said, okay, we might not spend a lot more time, doing that. Maybe we have enough cybersecurity and cybercrime legislation and laws. Is what we have sufficient enough to have, been a factor as to why the candidates perhaps overlooking that?
Well, no, we don't have a sufficient, robust framework for dealing with cybersecurity. We are just evolving. And, well, I must commend that the present administration is working tirelessly towards it. But where the challenge is the fact that there seems to be multiplicity of roles. So, for example, in the technology regime, you have the NCC, Nigerian Communications Commission. You have NIDA, National Information Technology Development Agency. You have the office NSA, that's the Office of National Security Advisor, also dealing with issues of cybersecurity. And interestingly, they all have a certain agency that looks to project issues of threats on our cyberspace. All of them, right? Why not infuse those into a single unitary form, right? So that we can stop wasting resources across board and have a single unitary form that deals with the issue of cybersecurity, cyber threats, cyber warnings, and then under a specific agency in that sense. So that's one key issue that we need to really look at.
Well, hopefully he would take the reins, the helm of affairs, come, a few months from now would also...
That's why these conversations are important, so that we begin to discuss dialectically the issues that matter to that space, as it were.
Yeah, so the digital economy, not too long ago, the Minister of Digital Economy, talked so much about how the digital economy has been, how would I call it, let me say fruitful, so to speak, in terms of job creation, in terms of, its revenue generation, and even how it is contributing to the GDP of the country. So it seems there is a good ground already, already.
There's some level of fertile
ground, exactly. So
to build upon.
What are the candidates saying in terms of improving what we currently have, to have more, to make the digital economy a lot more robust, or far more robust than it is currently?
Yes. So when it comes to the digital economy, it's a broad spectrum. A lot of things contribute. Electricity, addressing it can contribute significantly. Broadband can contribute towards, But in the context of digital economy now, we're talking of more of e-commerce, online, fintech and all that stuff around that e-commerce, online trading and on all that around that space. Now, in that context, shockingly, none of the candidates addressed the digital economy in that context. However, the manifesto of Atiku seemed to address filming, leveraging digitization for the entertainment industry. Because when you talk about the digital economy, one thing we don't realize is that the entertainment space is a key part of that economy.
How so? Yeah, how so? Because
it's a key part of that economy. So recently, the GDP of Nigeria, one of the key areas that contributes significantly to that space is actually the service industry, right? The service industry contributes, but it's a broad spectrum. The service industry includes the entertainment space, right? The service industry also includes some elements of e-commerce. And so when you look at that space, as it were, you see that a lot of our entertainers They earn foreign currencies from their skits, from YouTube, payments. Even those who make music also get from, all kinds of platforms. Since they've not advertised there, we're not going to, they stream on all kinds of platforms. Yeah. And so that brings revenue in. Those things are all digital. They're part of the key elements of the digital economy.
Quite agree.
So it's quite sad that none of the candidates seems to robustly deal with that space. Yeah. And it shows to the level of preparedness. And one of the key spaces, and which I'm quite keen about, is intellectual property, right? Because you cannot talk about development in that space if there's no robust framework for protection and implementation of protections for that space. And somewhere to start with, basically, when you look at it, for instance, Copyright Commission is on its own, right? And then you now have patents, designs, and trademarks under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, right? And why should that be the case? In more advanced clime, you have a single IP office that deals with trademark, copyright, patent, and makes policies that govern that space and are empowered to implement actions that can drive that space in that sense. So, so that's it. Interestingly, two of the candidates talked about it. You talk of, Tinubu talked about reviewing legislations that has to do with the IP and copyright space. But then Atiku then now talked about a single agency. That's where a single agency that covers to all, bringing in, even including NOTAP, National Agency for the Technology Transfer, NOTAP. And so bringing that and then framing them into a single unit in terms of their intellectual property development. And so I think that to a large extent, this is a time for candidates to start consolidating and learning from each other to upgrade what they want to offer the Nigerian people going forward.
Well, let's hope that happens, even though, let me not be pessimistic, but let's hope it happens. Thanks for staying with us. We still have with us Timi Olagunju, a policy consultant and tech lawyer. And we've been taking a deep dive into the policy or the manifestos of about candidates who are hoping to be voted as leaders or as presidents, more specifically, of the country come the general elections, which is going to be taking place in some days to come. Timi, we've looked at so many of these sectors, so many of these aspects of the tech ecosystem. But one of the things that a lot of people will be thinking about, because for any tech ecosystem to grow, for any startup to grow, one thing that is key is finance. And of course, we've talked about we've heard how startups have been raising capital, seed funding here and there. But at the same time, moving forward, what needs to be done, to raise investor confidence, in the country, so that we continue to have more of these funds. Not even what needs to be done. What are the candidates saying they will do to ensure that investor confidence, and angel investors, of course, their confidence remains high, in the talents that we have in the country?
Interesting point that you raised. One of the candidates, that's Tinubu's manifesto, talks to the fact that they were going to partner and incentivize angel investors, specific word, angel investors, and investors that are already in the space towards driving the already established development in that sector, right? So it's more like we will continue what the Buhari government is doing in this regard, but then we will then focus on increasing our policy stance towards incentivizing angel investors to drive the startup space and all that. For Atiku, it took an interesting route, which is that he talked about diaspora funds, right? In the manifesto talks about harnessing diaspora funding, channeling it towards ensuring that there's an investment in that space, in the tech space, as it were. And then also talked about partnerships with incubators, with accelerators, towards driving the space and then increasing technological development in that sector.
Yeah.
I think the last part was also, it talked about a setting fund, a research and innovation fund that is focused on helping employers get access to increased training capacities for staff, as well as increasing research for agencies, research institutions, and higher institutions of learning.
Yeah.
For OB, he sees it from a perspective of incentivizing the general ecosystem as to driving technology development in the area of security, education, agriculture, and a few other areas. For Kwankwanso, he didn't really deal to a large extent on the subject matter, but then, like I said earlier, focused more on development of indigenous, localized technology. So that is what they seem to have addressed in terms of, yes.
Yeah. So in terms of education, because
Yes.
there's this back and forth. Some say you can just do nano degrees, start earning your money. Some say go through the system,
Yes.
and some say go through the system and then do your nano degrees. At the same time, in terms of education, digital education, did they mention any plan, at any point?
No, but they didn't mention. But this is what happened, right? They talked buzzwords, all of them,
buzzwords.
all
Yeah, the
buzzwords. And this is article, I can remember clearly, in his manifesto, talks to development of policies that drives education for girls in technology. Then, interestingly, Tinubu used another word, scholarships for girls in technology.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can see that they are two different. One is a more specific scholarship. The other is, and then for OB, he talks about leapfrogging Nigeria, into the fourth industrial revolution, and interestingly, he was the only one that talked about, Industry 4.0. The fourth industrial revolution, and then focused on driving education in that sense as a tool to achieving it, right from primary straight down to other institutions.
Yeah.
But for Kwakwanso, nothing in that context, except I remember the fact that he specifically emphasized funding or increased incentive or increased salary and incentive for teachers in the science and technology space.
All right, so
or subjects.
Well,
yes,
we need to go, but I just want to quickly ask on this. Not too long ago, Nigeria signed an MOU with NASA. I mean, so it's this signing is coming at the end of this administration. Did any of them mention anything about continuity with that program or consolidation?
No. Then in terms of space technology, research development in that aspect, none of them mentioned it.
Well, at this point, I mean, sadly, we're going to end on that note. But I mean, it's been an eye-opening one. Hopefully, they're listening and they can readjust. Whoever wins would readjust their policies to, put in the other things that would need to be put to ensure that we have a better tech ecosystem, moving forward. But I have to say thank you for joining us
Thank you for
today
having me, Victor.
On the show. Timiola Gunju, policy consultant and tech lawyer. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, that's where we are, and that's where we're going to wrap the show up today as well. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm Victor Matthias. We'll leave you with the most viewed videos on our YouTube channel in the past week. Bye for now. Kicking off this week's top 5 videos, in 5th place is the G5 governors as they storm Enugu for a mega PDP rally. In 4th is a member of the G5, Nyesom Wike, taking a swipe at the leaders of the PDP.
We no get campaign for any other person though. No way. On a have that return on us. So this is our campaign. Nobody give us money now. We they contribute. Anybody where want to campaign for and to make him send us money. Now so. Not be so. Now so. Not be so. Now so.
3rd spot though uploaded barely 24 hours ago, is taken by the CBN governor announcing the extension of the deadline for the collection of old naira notes.
A 7-day grace period beginning on February 10 to February 17, 2023, in compliance with Section 20, subsection 3 and Section 22 of the CBN Act, allowing Nigerians to deposit their old notes at the CBN after the February deadline, when the old currency would have lost its legal tender status.
Former President Olusegun Obasanjo calling for continuity and lashing politicians promising to fix Nigeria overnight comes in second. While the top spot is the campaign trail of the Labour Party presidential candidate, Peter Obi, making a stop in Kano State.
We will ensure the enemy, the criminals are not stronger than government. We will have one government, and they will not have faith in it. We will secure Nigerians. We will unite Nigeria.